Emma Parker had never liked the rain. Yet that morning in Seattle, it felt like the rain had decided to test her patience. She stood on the front steps of her new apartment building, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, wondering why she had left Boston in the first place. The city looked nothing like she imagined. Too gray, too cold, too quiet. She had come here for a fresh start. But the silence around her felt heavier than the life she had left behind. Her phone buzzed. Another job rejection? She sighed, tossed the coffee into the trash, and tried to convince herself that everything would get better. That's when she noticed a commotion in the parking lot below. A woman's car wouldn't start, and a tall man in a dark jacket was trying to help. He leaned under the hood, calm and patient, his voice deep but soft. The woman laughed nervously, thanking him for his help. Emma didn't know why she kept watching, but she did. There was something about the man's presence, steady as if he belonged in any storm. When the car finally roared to life, the woman cheered, and he just smiled, brushing his hands against his jeans. Then he looked up. Their eyes met for only a moment, but it was enough to make Emma look away. She wasn't the kind of woman who got flustered easily, yet something about that brief glance unsettled her. She turned toward the entrance, pretending to search for her keys. But her heart beat faster than usual. Later that afternoon, when she went downstairs to get her mail, she found him again. He was standing by the lobby window holding a package. Up close, he looked even more striking. Not movie star handsome, but re-rugged in a quiet way, with kind blue eyes and a smile that felt familiar even though she'd never seen it before. "You're new here, right?" he asked. His voice had that calm confidence that instantly put people at ease. "Yeah," Emma replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Just moved in last week." "I'm Daniel," he said, offering his hand. "Apartment 3B. Welcome to the building." She shook his hand, trying to ignore how warm it felt. "Emma? Good to meet you, neighbor." He grinned, glancing at the rain outside. "You'll get used to the weather. Or at least pretend to." She laughed a small, surprised sound that felt good after days of silence. That was the start of something she couldn't name yet. Over the next few days, she kept running into Daniel everywhere. At the mailbox, in the hallway, at the tiny cafe across the street where she went every morning. Once he held the door for her when her hands were full of groceries. Another time, caught her struggling with a leaky kitchen faucet and offered to fix it. "You're not going to find a plumber who'll show up today," he said, kneeling under the sink with a flashlight. "Let me help. I used to work maintenance before I switched jobs." She hesitated, but he smiled, and somehow that was enough. 15 minutes later, the faucet stopped leaking. "You're a lifesaver," she said. He shrugged. "Just good timing." But it didn't feel like just timing. It felt like the universe had sent someone, right? When she needed a reminder that not all people disappear, they started talking more. Little conversations that stretched into longer ones. He told her he worked in construction, that he liked old music and long drives by the coast. She told him she was a graphic designer trying to start over after a breakup and a job that drained her soul. Daniel listened the way few people did, with full attention. No judgment. One rainy evening, they found themselves on the shared balcony between their apartments. The city lights glowed faintly beneath the clouds. Emma leaned against the railing, holding a mug of tea, while Daniel stood beside her. Arms crossed, watching the mist roll over the bay. "Do you ever feel like you're starting over too late?" she asked quietly. He turned to her, thoughtful. "No, I think starting over just means you're brave enough to try again." His words hit deeper than she expected. For months, she had carried guilt and fear like heavy luggage. But standing beside him, she felt a strange calmness, as if for once. She didn't need to explain why she was still figuring things out. From that night onward, something subtle began to shift. Daniel would check in on her when he came home late from work. Sometimes he'd bring takeout and leave it by her door with a note that said, "You look tired today. Don't skip dinner." He wasn't pushy. And that's what made it impossible to ignore him. One Saturday morning, she heard a knock. When she opened the door, Daniel stood there holding a small potted plant, I figured your balcony could use some green, he said. Emma smiled. You're really determined to make me like the city, aren't you? He grinned, just giving it a fair chance. As the days turned into weeks, their friendship grew into something neither of them defined, but both felt. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, real. Built on shared smiles and long silences that didn't feel awkward. Sometimes they walked together to the corner cafe. Sometimes they sat by the window during storms, talking about nothing and everything. Emma didn't realize it yet, but Daniel had become a part of her routine, a gentle constant in a city that had once felt unfamiliar. One evening, after helping her fix a light in her living room, Daniel paused before leaving. The air between them felt heavier than usual. You know, he said softly, you don't have to do everything alone. She looked up at him, unsure how to respond. He gave a small, almost shy smile. I'm around if you ever need someone to talk to. Just like that, he was gone, leaving her standing there with her heart caught somewhere between gratitude and confusion. Emma didn't realize when. Daniel's presence became part of her daily rhythm. It started with casual greetings in the hallway and small talks about the weather. But soon, their mornings felt incomplete without a smile. A shared cup of coffee or a few words before they both went about their day. It was all so natural, so unplanned. And yet, every small interaction made her feel alive again. For the first time in months, she laughed without forcing it. She slept without the constant noise of loneliness. But even as her heart began to open, she could feel the familiar hesitation in the background, a soft warning reminding her that good things never seem to last. One evening, Daniel knocked on her door with 2 boxes of takeout and said, I figured you might not have cooked yet. Emma almost said no. She wasn't used to people stepping into her space, but something about the way he stood there, relaxed and unassuming, made it impossible to turn him away. They sat on her small couch, eating noodles out of cartons, laughing about the strange rules of the building and their noisy upstairs neighbor. The conversation was light at first, but slowly it drifted into deeper waters. Emma told him about Boston, about the relationship that ended without warning, about how she packed her life into 3 suitcases and left because she couldn't bear to stay where everything reminded her of what she lost. Daniel listened quietly. No pity in his eyes, only understanding. When she finished, she expected him to change the subject. Instead, he said, sometimes leaving isn't running away. Sometimes it's the only way to breathe again. Words stayed with her long after he left that night. She realized that he wasn't trying to fix her. He wasn't offering advice or false comfort. He simply listened, and that, more than anything, felt new to her. As weeks passed, they grew closer in quiet, steady ways. Daniel helped her set up her small studio for freelance work. He showed up at her door with groceries when he knew she'd been too busy to shop. On weekends, they walked through Pike Place Market, buying fresh bread and flowers, blending in with the easy chaos of strangers. Sometimes they didn't talk much, and that was okay. Emma wasn't sure what they were, friends. Maybe something more, but she felt safe with him. Still, part of her refused to fully let go. She had been hurt before, and trust didn't rebuild overnight. She tried to keep her heart guarded, though she wasn't sure she was doing a very good job of it anymore. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled over the city, Daniel showed up with a toolbox. Your kitchen light's flickering again, he said. Mind if I take a look? She laughed. You know, you fix more things in my apartment than your own. He grinned. That's because yours always breaks first. He worked in silence while she made tea. When he finished, they stood by the window, watching the storm outside. The city lights blurred through the rain, and for a moment, everything felt softer, like the world had slowed down just for them. Out of nowhere, Emma said, I'm not good at letting people in. Daniel didn't turn to her. Most people aren't. Always been the kind who leaves before she gets left. Her voice was quiet, almost lost beneath the rain. It's easier that way. He finally looked at her, his expression calm but serious. Maybe, but it's lonelier too. She met his eyes, then steady, patient, impossibly kind, and something inside her cracked open. She didn't know how to explain what she felt. It wasn't love yet, not the kind that shakes the world. But it was something real, something she couldn't ignore. After that evening, they started spending more time together. Not because they planned to, but because it just felt right. Daniel had a way of making ordinary moments feel meaningful, sharing coffee, cooking dinner, even sitting in silence after a long day. Emma found herself waiting for his knock on her door, the sound that had become comfort to her. One Saturday, he invited her to a small music event by the waterfront. "You've been staring at that computer screen all week," he said. "You need some air." She almost refused. Crowds weren't her thing, but his easy smell. Winter came fast that year, heavy and cold. The city turned quiet under sheets of rain, and Emma found herself watching the world from her window more often than usual. The warm glow that Daniel had brought into her life was still there. But the world outside seemed darker, slower, uncertain. Life, as it often does, was about to test them. Daniel had been restless for days. His company had announced budget cuts, and soon his job was on the line. He didn't talk about it much, but Emma could see the worry behind his calm smile. One night she found him sitting on the stairs outside their building, staring into the streetlights. "Bad day?" she asked gently. He exhaled slowly. "They're letting people go. Might be me next." Emma sat beside him, her hands tucked into her coat. "You'll find something else. You always do." He smiled faintly but didn't answer. That was the thing about Daniel. He carried his troubles quietly. He didn't complain or ask for help. He just bore them until he could breathe again. A week later, he lost his job. He came to her door, trying to act casual, but his tired eyes gave him away. She invited him in, made coffee, and let him talk. It wasn't about the job, it was about pride. About feeling like everything he'd built was slipping away. "I'll be fine," he said finally. "I just need some time to figure things out." Emma nodded. "Take all the time you need." But as the days passed, the easy rhythm they shared began to shift. Daniel started avoiding her, keeping busy with odd jobs and long walks that took him away from the building for hours. Emma wanted to give him space, but the distance hurt. She missed the sound of his knock on her door, the quiet evenings they used to share. At the same time, her own life was changing. Her mother, who lived alone in Boston, had fallen ill. The news hit her like a wave she didn't see coming. Emma tried to stay strong, but between her work, worry for her mother, and Daniel's silence, she felt like everything was unraveling. One night, after another phone call with her mother's doctor, Emma broke down. She sat on her couch, tears running silently down her face. The world felt too heavy, too uncertain. She didn't expect Daniel to show up, but somehow he did. He stood at her doorway, soaked from the rain, holding a grocery bag. "I noticed your lights were off," he said quietly. "Thought you might need company." Without a word, she stepped aside to let him in. He set down the bag, pulled out soup and bread, and started heating it on the stove. They didn't talk much, just the soft sounds of rain and simmering soup filled the silence. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "She's getting worse," Emma said. "I don't know what to do." Daniel turned to her, his expression full of quiet compassion. "Then you go to her. Be with her. I'll help you pack." His certainty broke her. She didn't argue, didn't resist. For the first time in weeks, she let someone else carry the weight for a moment. 2 days later, she was gone back to Boston, back to the house she hadn't visited in years. Daniel helped her load her luggage into a taxi and stood in the cold morning air as she drove away. She looked back through the window once, catching his figure fading in the distance, and wondered if this was how good things ended quietly. Without warning, the weeks that followed were long and blurry. Her mother's condition stabilized slowly, but the hospital visits drained her. Daniel called sometimes, texted occasionally, but the distance between them grew. Every time she saw his name on her phone, her heart ached with a mix of comfort and sadness. Then one night, he sent a message that simply said, "You're stronger than you think. I'm proud of you." She stared at the screen, tears stinging her eyes. In the chaos of everything, he was still there somehow. Always there. By the time her mother was better and Emma returned to Seattle, months had passed. When she got to her apartment, the first thing she noticed was a small envelope taped to her door. Inside was a note written in his familiar handwriting. "I'm sorry for not being around more. I needed to figure myself out. But if you're reading this, it means you came back. And that's all I hoped for." Her chest tightened as she finished reading. She knocked on his door that evening, but there was no answer. His apartment looked empty through the small window beside the door. She found out from a neighbor that Daniel had taken a job to towns over temporary work, they said. No one knew when he'd be back. The days felt quiet again. Too quiet. The city that once felt alive now felt hollow. Emma buried herself in work, telling herself she'd moved on. But every night when she stepped onto the balcony, she half expected to see him leaning against the railing, smiling. Weeks passed. Then one Sunday morning, as she was watering the small plant he'd given her months ago, she heard a familiar voice. "Looks like you didn't kill it." She froze. Daniel was standing there, son behind him, holding 2 coffees and that same easy smile she'd missed. "You're back," she whispered. "I promised I would be," he said. They stood there for a long moment before either of them moved. He handed her a coffee and she took it with shaking hands. "I didn't think you'd wait," he said quietly. "I didn't think you'd come back," she replied. He smiled. The kind of smile that could melt away months of distance. "Guess we were both wrong." They spent the rest of the morning catching up, sitting on the balcony like old times. He told her about the job, how it wasn't what he wanted, but it helped him find his footing again. She told him about her mother and the strange way life had forced her to grow up all over again. When the sun began to set, Daniel looked at her and said, "You know, I used to think love was supposed to be easy. But maybe it's supposed to be hard sometimes. Maybe that's how you know it's real." Emma met his eyes and smiled softly. "Maybe it's not about easy. Maybe it's about showing up anyway." He nodded, reaching for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. The space between them felt different, now earned, grounded, real. The storm hadn't broken them. It had tested them, yes, pushed them apart, forced them to see who they were without each other. But in the end, it also showed them what it meant to stop. Spring arrived quietly that year, soft and slow, like the city was learning how to breathe again after months of rain. The air felt lighter, and so did Emma. Life wasn't perfect, her job was still uncertain. Bills still came too fast, but she had found something more important than comfort. She had found peace, and Daniel was part of that peace. He was back in the building now, not as a stranger or a neighbor, but as someone who belonged. Their friendship had deepened into something steady, something neither of them rushed to name. They spent evenings cooking together, talking about their dreams, their fears, and all the little things that made up ordinary life. Sometimes they'd just sit on the balcony in silence, watching the city lights ripple over the water. Those moments said more than words ever could. One Sunday morning, Emma woke up to the smell of pancakes. Daniel was in her kitchen, humming off-key, flipping pancakes like he owned the place. "You're terrible at staying out of my kitchen," she said, laughing. He shrugged. "You're terrible at making breakfast. I'm saving us both." She leaned against the counter, watching him move around comfortably. There was something beautiful about the simplicity of it. The way he fit into her mornings without forcing anything. After breakfast, they took a walk by the harbor. The sky was clear, boats drifting lazily across the water. Emma found herself thinking about how different things felt now compared to the day she first met him. Back then, she had been closed off, afraid to let anyone close. Now, she couldn't imagine a day without him in it. "Do you ever think about the past?" she asked as they walked. "All the time," he said, "but not the way I used to. I used to look back and see mistakes. Now I just see lessons." She smiled faintly. "And what lesson did you learn from me?" He stopped walking and looked at her seriously. "That some people are worth waiting for." His words caught her off guard. She tried to laugh it off, but her heart skipped a beat. There was no pretending anymore. What they had wasn't just friendship. It was love, quiet and patient, built slowly through everything they'd faced. That evening, they sat by the balcony again, the sky painted in orange and pink. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You know, I almost didn't come back," he said. Emma looked at him. "Why? I didn't think you'd want me to. I thought maybe you were better off without me messing things up." She shook her head. "Daniel, you never mess things up. You helped me start living again." He turned to her, his expression soft. "You were already doing that? I just showed up at the right time." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound being the faint hum of traffic below. Then Emma spoke quietly. "When I met you, I was tired. Not just physically tired in a way that made everything feel heavy, but you made me feel light again. You made me remember what it feels like to hope." Daniel reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "And you made me believe that home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a person." The city lights flickered across their faces as they sat there, holding hands, saying nothing more. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a movie scene. It was real, and that made it perfect. Over the next few weeks, life found a new rhythm. Daniel started a small repair business, working for local shops and neighbors. Emma landed a long-term design contract with a Seattle magazine. They were both busy, but they always found time for each other: late dinners, quick coffee runs, walks under the soft evening rain. One night, Emma came home exhausted after a low,